What's up, people? Balmont here. So, today is Cyberpunk 2077's first anniversary. The game's release was probably the biggest clusterfuck I've ever seen happen in the game industry. Hell man, even my mom knew that Keanu Reeves was quote-unquote in a game that had taken a lot of flack for some reason. And she's never picked up a controller more than once in her life. That's how bad things were. And of course, I will mention the bugs we're still getting even after a year of updates. But in this video, I'll be reviewing the game for what it has to offer us. This won't be just another slam fest. You know, their higher-ups really fucked up in spades. I just feel bad for the people who were actually working on the game because underneath it all, Cyberpunk is a really good game. So wake the fuck up, Samurai. We've got a city to burn.
Not so much your Greek friend.
Right off the bat, Cyberpunk 2077's biggest strength surely lies in its characters. As I played, I found amazing how well most of the characters were written and integrated to the story. Even secondary ones like Judy Alvarez, Wakako, the Fixer, and River Ward, the character whose side job I enjoyed the most. But we'll get to the side jobs in a moment. That's a goldmine right there. You know, unlike in a lot of open world games where I just talk to a bunch of motherfuckers so they'd give me a rewardable excuse to go out and kill another bunch of motherfuckers, every single mission I did, main question or otherwise, actually had me looking forward to seeing what the involved characters had to say, as much as the mission itself. And I can count on the fingers of a single hand the number of times I was disappointed. Really. There's even an out-of-nowhere and completely missable job where you get to accompany a man who's on death row. And unlike in most videos where I would begin talking about the main missions, this time around I'm gonna do things a little bit differently. I'm gonna talk about the side jobs first. See, it's hard to disconnect the main quests from the side missions because everything enriches and furthers your immersion in Cyberpunk 2077's world. This actually reminds me of Skyrim, only at a much smaller scale. There's a main story for you to follow, but the real meat lies in the many secondary missions you can take on, the people you can meet. Remember River Ward, who I mentioned a few moments ago? His is one of the richest side quests I've ever played in any game. It starts with a BD footage of River arriving just in time to off Peter Haworth, a cyber psycho that was moments away from killing Lucius Rhine, the mayor. However, Ryan ends up dying later that same day from a hard problem. Weird, right? And of course, River is awfully suspicious of this, but has no actual way of linking those two incidents together. And things get even dodgier when his boss orders him to drop the case, and even his partner, Harold, warns him against going further with the investigation. From here on out, it turns into a classic Lethal Weapon type of movie, but with a modern cyberpunk twist. As you and River work together and uncover the truth about it all, and even uncover a criminal who abducted children, there's always that impending living on the razor's edge feeling to it. There's even a cute moment where you get to play as cop versus criminal with River's younger siblings, and this is just one of the amazing side quests you get to play. And I'm not even gonna get started on the Delaware side quest, but let me say this, for all you pro players out there, there's an Easter egg that made me laugh a lot. It's really good stuff. And I can almost bet that you're gonna find many characters you're gonna click with right away as you play this game. They're really well written. And there's another very well used element that helps enrich in Cyberpunk's world. The endless amount of files and emails you find through the game. Some of them are funny, others are daily conversations, exchanges related to the story, and so on and so forth. There was this one person I found dead in the middle of nowhere with a text shard next to him. The dialogue that was recorded showed us that the man was roaming the desert alone with his daughter and was forced to break away from her momentarily, all while swearing he'd be back soon, only to never be able to fulfill the promise. While most of those files are completely optional and I myself didn't have the patience to read through all of them, this is definitely a smart way to help further Night City's lore, how its people lived, how they thought, and sometimes how they died. Now you're probably wondering, hey Balmont, you hiding something, man? You know, that's all good, but when are you gonna talk about the main story? Don't worry, my friend, I'm gonna do that right now. I just decided to tell you about the side jobs first because playing Cyberpunk without going for them would be a crime. They're so good. You have 3 backgrounds to choose from: Corpo, Street Kid, or Nomad. I played the game twice and went both with Corpo and Nomad. And while they're nice, they all end with you meeting your new best bud, Jackie. Going the Corpo path yielded me an amazing Blade Runner inspired trip through the city. It was breathtaking, really. However, your beginnings don't have any bearing on the story progression whatsoever, it's kind of a wasted potential. You only get a few different dialogue options here and there, which is kind of a bummer because, it would have been awesome to see Corporal V getting to do different missions. After all, he's going after Arasaka, his ex-employer. His knowledge about the company could very well yield some extra story missions, like coming into further contact with other organizations and such. They could even yield a different ending altogether. This was a given, really. And after you beat the introduction scenarios, you're met with the game's first glaring problem. And I really mean that. It's bad. You're shown a montage where Jackie and V develop their relationship and strengthen their trust in one another by taking on risky jobs, getting clocked to the face, going to parties, meeting Jackie's girlfriend Misty, his mom. All of this seems really fun, but the problem was that this was central to creating any real bond with Jackie. That's at least 5 or 6 hours of gameplay we never got. And it's crystal clear that all of this was meant to be playable hadn't they rushed to release the fucking game in the state it was at. This lands a severe blow to your connection with Jackie, who's supposed to be your best friend. Being someone's best friend implies that you've lived a lot with them, you feel a lot, you have a lot of memories. But since we never actually got to play any of that, by the time he dies during the death of Silverhand's digital construct, you end up feeling sorry because a guy with a good and sometimes naive heart died, not because you bonded with him. You never had a chance to do that. And later on, you get to participate in Jackie's funeral. And while that scene in particular was very well done, it was almost touching. We never got enough interaction with our kind-hearted brute to connect at a deeper level with what was happening during the funeral. So it was beautiful, but felt empty. This and the zero impact your background has on the story both scream rush job. There's so much more that could have been done. Fuck man, even someone who began playing video games yesterday could think up, a nice thing or two. And shortly after Jackie dies, the game's main star takes the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Johnny Silverhand. You see, I didn't watch any videos or read much about Cyberpunk 2077 prior to its release. I'm not the hype train type of guy. I either avoid pre-release material because I don't want anything to be spoiled for me, or give promo stuff a hard pass because it rarely lives up to the hype it creates. With the exception of Mr. X's Nightmare. Those motherfuckers delivered more than they promised. It was colossal. So while I came into the game knowing Keanu would be in it, I had a very strong feeling he wouldn't be very present. Hiring a high-profile actor was probably very expensive, and Keanu's always involved in the movie at some level, so, he's a very busy man. But no, much to my surprise, Johnny's always popping up, even during side jobs and transitions. It felt surreal to hear Keanu's voice throughout my 50+ hours of gameplay. And Silverhand didn't disappoint as a character either. No sir. Going for the eternal teen rebel character would have been piss easy, but throughout the game you see both his ideas and his tone changing about many of his own thoughts. He's still hell-bent on taking down Arasaka after his initial failed attempt which led to his death. But it's how he does it that changes. It's like I say man, the same glass of water can be drank with very different spirits. He's still a rebel to almost the very end, depending on the ending you choose, but he grows. And that can be easily associated with his forced coexistence with V, the main character. There are a lot of genuinely well-written friendship moments between the player and Mr. Samurai. And you know what? Some of them are actually really touching. They were beautiful to watch. I liked it. And still on the subject of Johnny Silverhand, you get to relive some of Johnny's most important life experiences, like the previously mentioned assault on Arasaka building and his time with Alt, a genius hacker he had a fling with. And those are some of the game's biggest highlights. They were well written and executed. I'd have loved to have gotten to play even more as Silverhand alone. And let me tell you right now, man, I hope there's more Silverhand-focused content on the way. There are many times where I caught myself thinking I wish the game had Johnny as the lead character, not V. And speaking of V, here's another bump on the road, alright? I just have to say it. Now, if you've played the last two Deus Ex games and like the Cyberpunk genre, then you'll surely remember Adam Jensen. He was one mean son of a bitch and a character with a powerful presence, no matter what the situation he was thrust in. And this was thanks to both the script and the phenomenal performance of Elias Tufexis. Did I say his name right? Hey Elias, on a very slim chance you ever watch this, let me know. Jensen didn't just have a deep voice, the character showed many strong emotions while still being in line with his personality. He wasn't just there so people would shout exposition at him. And V, on the other hand, while he or she does have some good moments, unfortunately gets the short straw. I can remember a single time I actually said, "Fuck yeah," or actually felt like the best merc in Night City after hearing something the male version of V said. You know, if with Adam Jensen we could feel the power and weight of his words whenever he talked back at someone. In Cyberpunk, I felt more like whatever I was gonna say would serve more as a way to decide what whoever I was interacting with was gonna say back to me, you know, and not as if I was someone really relevant or important in that conversation. The male voiceover of V is bland and monotone. You can tell exactly how V is gonna sound by the subtitle alone before he so much as opens his mouth. On my second playthrough, which is what you're seeing right now, I went with the female V. The voiceover improves dramatically over here. Really. You know, it's still kinda generic, but I'd see more as a script problem. You know, the voice actors did do a good job with what she had. And remember how I said it was hard to disconnect the main quest from the side jobs because they were added so much to the game's world? Well, should it do that, you'll also find very interesting moments, like the Cyberchip Theft mission, where Jackie buys the cyber farm, your interactions with Rogue, or rather Silverhand's interactions with the best fixer in Night City, your conversations with Goro Takemura, who also doubles as a comic relief in some very well-placed and funny situations, such as this one.
Hey Dashi, don't leave this poor guy hanging.
This is not the best time, truly.
Oh, come on. I haven't heard it in years.
Better buckle up!
And it was really cool that you witnessing this isn't scripted.
Wow.
Sure, as soon as you approach the situation, this conversation will play out and the conversation itself is scripted. But you can skip on this altogether by entering the place and ignoring both of them outside. And speaking of lesser NPCs, you know, the pedestrians, you sometimes get to witness some really interesting conversations out of nowhere. But those are just some examples of the good moments you're gonna have with this game. You know, there's also the rescue of Evelyn Parker, which is very, very heavy. You know, this is some heavy shit here, be warned. You know, after it ended, I stood there looking at the screen thinking, fuck. The game has 3 main endings and a secret one, aptly named Don't Fear the Reaper. And also, did you know that the mission names are actually given by Johnny Silverhand after he enters your system? They're all names of classic songs, and Don't Fear the Reaper is a song by the Blue Oyster Cult. It's one of the greatest classic rock songs out there. Be sure to check it out, after you're done with this video, of course. In my first playthrough, I went with the Johnny and Rogue ending. Really, I felt like this was their gig, man, not mine. You know, I was running on borrowed time. As much as I liked the events after the second attack on Arasaka, and as a musician, it was quite entertaining to watch Johnny explain to the Star Clerk why certain guitars he was selling sucked. The invasion of the building itself couldn't have been more rushed even if they tried. You know, Adam Smasher, who's oftenly teased as this bad motherfucker, he ends up being a very run-of-the-mill boss battler. You know, he's just there. To further elucidate this, Johnny and Rogue's first attack on Arasaka was much grander and impactful. The final mission on this ending in particular absolutely needed to be not just as grand, but even grander, even greater, even better. Again, man, as much as I liked what I saw after that, the final showdown was very underwhelming, at least on this path. And this leads us to yet another problem. Certain characters never got the screen time they needed. Aside from Adam Smasher, who could also have showed up more times, Yorinobu Arasaka is this game's greatest sin. He is the bad guy. He is the figurehead. His father was also a dictator, a huge, colossal dick. But the cyber implant theft mission ends with Yorinobu strangling his father with his own hands. This was a colossal setup. And you never see this motherfucker again unless you go for Hanako's ending. You see a couple of interviews here and there, but this was lazy as shit. Hanako's ending does provide some good insight into the character, but still, dude, he was the figurehead. And only getting more exposure about him in one ending is lazy writing. While I certainly enjoyed the game's story for what it was, I can't help but also point out that the game's story needed more run-ins with Arasaka. You know, think about it. How come no one ever actively goes after V? The security forces got a clear look at both him and Jackie during their escape, and you driving around in the open in Night City would surely make it even easier for such a powerful corporation to identify and find you. It's like slapping a huge target to your back and saying, "Hey, shoot me!" And also, at least one more run-in with Adam Smasher before the ending would have benefited the overall feeling of threat the company represented to the city. You know, they could have captured V, made it so that Rogue would have to bail you, giving you different courses of action if you had a corpo background, for example. You know, it was a given, and they didn't take this shot. And one more thing, Takemura, the fan favorite. I absolutely love him as a character. You know, getting messages from him thinking he was on Google looking for cheap food was hilarious. But how come no one ever finds this motherfucker? You know, he throws the plot armor card that he has connections in the city, but he was never above Yorinobu himself, who sent an execution squad after both Goro and V right at the beginning of the game, only to never do it again. Major plot hole here. So, in the end, Cyberpunk's main story has some really good moments and some gaping holes clearly created by the rush job mentality. However, if you throw in all of the side jobs and all of the great characters you find in them, to me, the overall experience is much more positive than negative. Now, let's talk gameplay. Cyberpunk 2077 certainly took many cues from games like Shadowrun, Borderlands, and Deus Ex. And any game that draws from Deus Ex is a game I will look into, even if I only end up getting pissed off. Seriously, Deus Ex is one of my favorite franchises ever. It's up there with Metal Gear Solid and Dark Souls. It's amazing. And just like the main missions and side quests, looking at Cyberpunk's combat tools as a whole is a must so you can enjoy all this game has to offer, and there's a lot of stuff here. The weapon variety is pretty much what you'd expect, you know, with a few different subtypes, like for sidearms you have both pistols and revolvers, for shotguns you have magazine-loaded and individual shell insertion types, and so on. Now, something that immediately stuck out for me was the raw feeling of force of impact whenever we fire a gun. It was so satisfying. And a strategy I often found myself doing was switching to the shotgun, getting within range, and then firing at an enemy so I topple him, and then I'd switch to another weapon and lay it on him. You also have weapons that can pierce through walls and containers. Sniper rifles that fall into this category are deadly. There's also the very cool option to go with smart weapons whose bullets have a certain degree of auto-tracking. There's also melee weapons like mantis blades, gorilla arms, katanas, and improvised melee weapons like wrenches and baseball bats. I haven't really done a whole lot of playing with melee weapons, but from what little experience I got with them, they're very high damaging and useful. As a matter of fact, as I write this, I'm already thinking of a good way to mix both melee and firearms. See, this last sentence of mine alone already shows you how many possibilities you have for character builds. On my first playthrough, I went for the stealth, hacker, and long-distance assassin type of character, like I almost always do ever since my Mass Effect 1 days. But on my second playthrough, I decided to go the full soldier type of character, and I'm already thinking about my third playthrough where I will be leaning more towards melee. And I'm not forcing myself to do any of this. However, what didn't feel natural about melee was the hit detection and animations. It's like it's straight out of a 2008 game. No one ever really bothers improving first-person close-quarter combat animations. Now, you can't possibly talk about Cyberpunk without talking about hacking. They go hand in hand. Like the words EA and evil. Fuck man, EA should stand for evil assholes. But as I was saying, if you've played Shadowrun or Deus Ex before, then you'll be right at home here. You can hack devices for money, enemy optics so they can't see shit, disable their movement, shut down their weapons, chain poison them, set them on fire, make them short circuit, hack cameras, distract enemies, you get the idea. If you go the full hacker path, you become a compact-sized version of the Black Death, infecting and killing everyone in your path before they realize what the hell's going on. But there's a caveat here. See the pattern, you know, whenever I say something good about the game, I immediately say something bad about the very same thing. If you're a veteran like myself to games that have hacking mechanics, you'll find your way around all the different cyberdecks, stats, and hacks in no time. But if you're a newcomer to the cyberpunk genre, then you're probably gonna feel lost and even miss out on some of the mechanics. The game offers very little explanation about hacking and its tools. Now, moving one neural node to the right, let's talk about skill trees. This game pulled no punches with its skill customization and upgrades. From quicker RAM recharging to slow motion dodging, immunity to poison, faster weapon charging, more damage with specific weapons, and many crafting upgrades, Cyberpunk surely delivers a lot of stuff for you to customize your mercenary to the best of your tastes. I'm on my second playthrough, and there's stuff I haven't so much as touched because they don't fit my current character build. This is really good stuff, and I always give credit where it's due. But we're not done with customization. No sir. Throughout Night City, you'll find clinics that allow you to install many modifications to your body. You can get better optics, more defense, resistance to statuses, the mantis blades, gorilla arms, and so on. My favorite upgrade, hands down, was the double jump ability. Should you ever decide to play this game, then please buy it as soon as possible. This will turn Night City into your personal playground. You'll be able to reach different places and take severely different routes when going towards an objective. Hell, this will even give you a massive advantage during firefights and stealth sections too. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And yes, by now I have also realized that this review should be called Cyberpunk is good. However, at least on the base PlayStation 4 version, many were the times where I suffered some sort of bug at a critical moment in combat, like my smart rifle beginning to shake as if it had been made by Parkinson's tech as soon as I aimed down its sight, then returning to normal, then starting to act up again, then returning to normal again, and acting up again. There were also a few times where one of my weapons simply would not fire, for no reason. Now, I know what you're thinking, they're ID locked by the lolly-lulay-lo. Yeah, let's just never mention that again. It's dangerous. And there were also other instances where my firearm would simply not show. I'd be holding an invisible dick firing high-powered rounds out of nowhere at people. And I also found something that's absolutely unnerving in this game. Sometimes the game will not register your healing command properly if you have to do it while you reload a weapon. It's kinda random, but I've died quite a few times because Princess V thought it was more important to ignore my input and roll the rest of the reload animation than healing and not offing himself to Hatfield, the place where he sometimes seems to be the mayor of. Damn it! So, in the end, the combat possibilities Cyberpunk brings you are very good and diverse. And there's also many types of grenades, just a quick heads up. And while the bugs that come with them are not as constant as it may seem, they're still somewhat frequent, potentially ruining your shit during more intense sequence. Another important aspect that's never explained or even touched upon by the game itself is the crafting and upgrade system. You see, Cyberpunk has a ridiculous amount of pieces of clothing that you can use. Really, there's a fuckload of stuff. Now, the problem with games that have both a lot of pieces of armor and different statuses is that if you go by the stats alone, you end up looking like a bum. On my second playthrough, I decided to invest more time in actually making combinations I thought looked cool. There are countless stores with pretty fashionable items, and the way to keep your cool looking gear at the same level as the better gear you find down the line is by upgrading. I found it pretty refreshing to be able to look the way I wanted and still be able to tag a heavily armored soldier. And while still on the crafting subject, make sure to check on some of the skills you can learn in that skill tree. They're very useful, especially getting 3 higher quality components after disassembling a shitty pistol or shoot. Now let's talk about your rides. This game has some very creative design for the cars. During my time with the game, I would always enter new cars and go into first-person view just so I could see what their interiors would look like. And they were all very different. This level of attention to detail helps further your immersion and involvement with the game's universe. You know what I'm about to say, right? It can't be that easy. Yes, there's a fucking catch. When the game was first released, it had some of the worst driving mechanics I've ever seen in an open world game. They were pathetic. The driving has really been improved a lot after the patches, but it's not quite there yet. Just like with Watch Dogs Legion, and if you haven't watched my video about it, I'm gonna leave the link for you right now. The driving in Cyberpunk feels severely dated, which brings us to the ugliest aspect of this game. Its physics mechanics. While they didn't make me like the game any less, for a AAA game with a AAA price tag, this is inexcusable. Take a look at this is pathetic. Fuck, even Half-Life 2, a game that was released before some of you were even born, had much better physics. And this is just a very little piece of all of the fuck-ups you're gonna find in the physics department, of all of the slack jobs you're gonna find. Ugh. And speaking about other bugs, you find people clipping through walls, you find wobbly corpses, unresponsive enemies during firefights, and a couple of more things. A lot of things have improved, while certain other things took a major step back. For example, after patch 131, I'm seeing more texture pop-ins. And there's some other very basic flaws I saw within this game. There are surely many more, but those are the ones that stuck out to me the most. Like, for example, your item management. You see, you're gonna get a whole lot of clothing, you're gonna get a whole lot of weapons, grenades, mods, and even junk. And the biggest issue I found here, especially for a game that clearly took cues from Borderlands, is that first, you cannot lock items. You wouldn't believe the amount of times I ended up disassembling an important item or pistol. And trust me, you're gonna fuck up too. And another very basic oversight was the fact that you cannot mark multiple items to either sell or disassemble. You have to do it one by one. I mean, Jesus Christ, man, this game has been out for a year and no one has added this very simple but vital feature to games that have you carrying around a lot of crap. So, in the end, as it stands, Cyberpunk 2077 is sort of like a beautiful piece of furniture with many poorly assembled parts and some termites eating away at it. It's by no means a bad game. I really enjoyed my time with it and I'm already thinking about my third playthrough. However, I cannot turn a blind eye to all the faults it has, at least on the base PlayStation 4 version. For what it has to offer and in terms of fun, I give it a 7 out of 10. If all or most of the bugs had been fixed by now, I'd give it a solid 8. It's too bad that the corpos at CDPR decided to take the very same path Johnny Silverhand meets with extreme contempt. Greed and profit at the expense of people. And it is with that cosmic irony that I leave you. Hope you had a good time watching this video. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Later.